I don't know if Judge knew this, but I had actually planned on singing Home Means Nevada. My voice went out, my 2-year-old picked something up, and so I lost my voice, so for another time, I guess. Like Karen said, I'm Bob Sweeten. I'm the city prosecutor. I'm deputy city attorney, so I do a little bit of civil work with the city. My boss is Cheryl Hunt, city attorney. Then most of my work is prosecuting criminal offenses. This is okay. Most of my work as city prosecutor involves, as Judge said, domestic violence prosecution, DUI prosecution. We also have a number of traffic offenses, which don't take a lot of our time and resources, pretty simple cases. And then we occasionally get some other crimes, denials from the DA's office and so forth. But specifically, and what I want to talk about today is domestic violence and what we face as prosecutors at the domestic violence, as we prosecute domestic violence cases. I've prosecuted at every level of government, federal, state, and local, and the challenges that you face in a domestic violence case, whether felony or whether it's a felony that puts the victim in the hospital, or whether it is a misdemeanor shoving match, are the same. And that is, and I think, I'm not sure if Marsha's planning on talking about this, or we have some pamphlets on it, but it involves the cycle of abuse. And that is, just briefly, I won't go into great detail on it, but where the event happens. Okay, there's a hit or a shove, and we'll talk a little more about what domestic violence entails, but there's something that occurs that lands these folks in court, or someone in jail. And within a couple of days, the offender or the defendant will come back with flowers and roses and chocolates and apologies and all of these things to the victim and say, I'm so sorry, I love you, I never would hurt you. And even though they did, right, just a couple days earlier, they'll say, I would never hurt you, you know that. And they'll win back, and it's understandable why. This is someone that you love, someone that you've been with for a long time, someone that you care about. And you want things to work, and you feel like they've turned a leaf, and then things are good for a long time. And when things stay good and they're comfortable and they get good, then all of a sudden things start getting bad again. And it swings back, and then they're back in court. And so it's not uncommon that we see in a domestic violence case witnesses, or victims rather, that don't want to come to court and testify against their offenders. And victims that don't want to make a statement when police arrive even. They'll call the police. Police will arrive, and within 5 or 10 minutes they've changed their minds. And they say, nothing happened, I was overreacting, and they put it on themselves. And that's why, I want to mention that because I think groups like the Women Voters of Mesquite and the Women League of Voters here in Mesquite and groups around town like Safe Nest, like Marsha works for, are incredibly important because you can work as a support to these victims who are going, and many folks unfortunately have been through the domestic violence cycle themselves. And so you can act as a support to these victims when they need it, when otherwise they wouldn't have that support, and they feel like, and a lot of folks here in Mesquite, the reality is what I see a lot in my daily work are folks that have come here from Utah. They've moved here with a significant other for work or to work in the casinos, something like that. Sometimes just move down here and start a new life. They don't have any other family or friends or support system here except that person they're here with, who becomes their the defendant in our criminal cases, and they don't have any other choice but to go back to this person. Excuse me. So it's really unfortunate. But with groups like yours, with what we're trying to do today, with what the judge was saying, I think we can really make a large step towards at least making a dent in that problem. Now, I want to talk briefly about what domestic violence is. A lot of folks think, and I thought before I became a prosecutor, that domestic violence was what we see on, cops, or, what we think about in the media or something like that, where there is, a man and he comes home drunk and the wife says, where were you? I had dinner ready, and the kids were upset you weren't here, and then he says, don't hassle me, and then he smacks her and she falls to the ground, and then a neighbor sees and calls police, and then he goes to jail. Well, that would be a domestic violence. But domestic violence is much more than that, especially here in the state of Nevada. Nevada has a very, very broad domestic violence statute. Domestic violence includes everything from the catch-all, to give you an idea, in our domestic violence cases is a provision that allows that if an offender does anything that would force a person to or prohibit them from engaging in any activity that they would want to or be able to do otherwise, that is a domestic violence. So where this is most practical and where this happens is the bedroom door situation. So you go into the bedroom, you get in a fight, right? And you go in the bedroom and you close the door behind you. And boyfriend or girlfriend is upset that you went in the bedroom and you left the situation. And they come and they start banging on the bedroom door. And they say, you get outside, you come out here right now. And then they break down the bedroom door or something like that. That would be a domestic violence. And the reason for that is that Nevada legislators saw, they don't always see, right, the real problems, I think, if you've been in Nevada long enough. But in this case, they saw that domestic violence starts long before the actual physical contact. And so they said, hey, where this is severe, where somebody is calling the police and asking for help from a locked bedroom, and they've got an attacker on the other side of the door, police should be able to have some teeth in it. They should be able to show up and say, and you shouldn't be able to say, hey, this is my house, I'll bang on the door if I want, this is my wife, you leave us alone. And the cops used to have to say, it's his house, he can bang on a door if he wants. Now cops can say, no, you can't because you're arguing with each other, we have witnesses, and you're going to jail for the night. And it at least gets them out of that situation. Now, that's kind of the wide spectrum of domestic violence. We also have had some legislative updates in it where if you, it involves pets, if you make, harm animals in the course of the domestic violence, that can raise it to a felony level. Also, domestic violence by strangulation. So if it's even a first offense, it doesn't matter. If the throat is grabbed at all during a domestic violence and the police deem that the intent of that throat grab was more than just a mere happenstance, right? They're not shoving each other and you shove here, for example, but it was a grab and a strangle. They can charge that as a felony, okay? And so domestic violence law, as Judge Toon said, has really tightened up here in Nevada. We have some of the best domestic violence statutes on the books, and I think that's especially important here in Nevada because much like Mesquite, Nevada, or Las Vegas and Reno also have populations where you have folks that weren't born and raised there. They don't have a large family support system. And so domestic violence happens, and once it happens, they don't have anywhere to go. They can't just run to their mom or dad's house or sister's house or best friend's house because they don't have that support system. So they bail out their offender. Their offender comes home, and then the abuse cycle starts again. But we're able to kind of have teeth in that now. Now briefly, I would like to talk about what happens once someone's brought into court, where I generally enter the picture, or where the prosecutor generally enters the picture of domestic violence, and that's the day after, right? So they're brought into jail, the offender's brought into jail. Generally, domestic violence is not always, but generally they happen at nighttime. The next morning, the offender will be brought before the court, and the prosecutor will show up. And here in Nevada, we have some of the strictest bail settings for domestic violence offenders as well. So the maximum penalty, the maximum fine on a first-time run-of-the-mill domestic violence is $1,000. The maximum fine on a second offense, domestic violence, run-of-the-mill, is $1,000. That's because it's a misdemeanor. So maximum fine on a misdemeanor is $1,000. So that's why. However, bail, in order to get out of jail on one of these, the minimum for first-time domestic violence is $3,000. So you have to put up $3,000 in order to get out of jail. If it's your second offense, it's $5,000. Third offense, that's felony at that point. So you're dealing with much harsher penalties. You're likely just going to sit in jail until your trial date. You can't afford it. You don't have significant financial assets.